Hi viewers, myself Ramya. Now I would like to share a situation which occurred recently during Sankranti holidays. For every Sankranti holidays, we go to our grandparents' home. But this time, we invited our grandparents to celebrate Sankranti festival at my home. One morning, while my grandmother is going to take bath, she suddenly, unexpectedly slipped down. We all rushed to the spot and we made our grandmother to sit on the sofa. And my mother ordered me to give glass of water. Then I gave glass of water in a glass which is made up of a glass. Then my grandmother refused to drink in that glass. She asked me to bring in steel glass. Then I rushed to kitchen and I bought water in steel glass. But I got doubt why my grandmother unexpectedly slipped down and why she refused to drink water in a glass which is made up of a glass. Then I went to my elder sister. She is studying intermediate. Then I asked. Then my sister told it is because of less friction. Yes. Now I am going to explain about friction is necessary evil. After completion of my explanation, we come to know what is friction and its types, necessity of friction and daily life applications, and we also come to know where the friction acts as evil. Here, a boy is playing with the ball and by holding, and they are operating the mouse, writing with the pen, holding the glass, holding the key, kicking the ball, and man is trying to pull the box, but the box is not moving, and a box is moving on the inclined plane. These are all the activities which we do in our daily life and which we see. So these activities are done by us. So due to an invisible power, that is force. A part of this, the friction is also an invisible power, and the friction is also called as a force. Friction is a word. It is derived from the Latin language, which means to rub. The force which opposes the relative motion of the two surfaces of the bodies in contact is called as frictional force. The friction is caused by an irregularities on the two surfaces which are in contact. The irregularities on the two surfaces which are in contact makes interlocking each other. So when we attempt to move any object, so we have to apply some force to overcome the interlockings. Here the ball is moving because we applied some force, but afterwards it comes into rest position due to the friction. It comes into rest position due to friction. Types of frictional forces: static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, fluid friction. Static friction. It is the friction which comes into play when the surface of the objects are at rest relative to each other. Static friction force is also known as self-adjusting force. Means if we apply any force, it does not move. It is at its rest position. It doesn't move from its position due to static friction force. Here the sofa is not moving, it is at the rest position due to static friction, and there a man is pushing but the box is not moving from its rest position due to the static friction. The objects will be at the rest position due to static friction. Here all the objects which are at rest position because of the static friction. Sliding friction. The force that opposes by one surface when the surface of the one object moves related to the surface of the other object. Sliding friction force when it occurs means when an object is sliding over the other object, then the other object will be at the rest position. Here the ball is moving, but the surface is at the rest position due to sliding friction force. In the sliding friction force, only one surface will be moving on, then the other surface will be at the rest position. We can see a man is pushing the box, but it is moving, but the surface is at the rest position. The box is moving on the inclined plane, but the inclined plane is at the rest position due to sliding friction. Fluid friction. In science, common name for liquids and gaseous is fluid. Liquids like water, diesel, petrol. Gaseous, air. Force that opposes between the layers of fluid that are moving relative to each other is called as fluid friction. We see aeroplanes are moving in the air. While they are moving in the opposite direction to them, the fluid friction force is opposing their movement. And while we are swimming in opposite direction, the fluid friction force is experienced by us. So, the fluid friction force opposes the movement of the aeroplane while they are moving in the air or while we are swimming. Rolling friction. When a body rolls over the surface of the other body, the friction is offered is called as rolling friction. Here, the ball is moving here, but due to frictional force, it is moving and it is rolling on the surface because of rolling friction, and then it gets stops after some time. And when a body rolls over the surface, then it comes afterwards to the rest position due to rolling friction force. These are all the types of frictional forces. Is friction is necessary for us? We see people walking on the road, and some people run on the road, and sometimes we see some people slip down because the friction force depend upon the nature of the surfaces. If the friction is greater when the surface is rough, because the irregularities will be more on the rough surface. Due to this, the friction will be more. But if we take smooth surface, the irregularities will be less. So, the friction will be less. That's why sometimes we slip down because of frictional forces. Friction plays a vital role. Without friction, we cannot do anything. It is very important to imagine a world without friction. It seems like a nightmare. The first step out of the bed, we may slip down if there is no friction. So, it is the specialty of the friction. And the people and the animals move from one place to other because the frictional force. If there is no frictional force, they doesn't move from one place to other. And if there is no frictional force, even anybody cannot stand. Even I cannot stand at present here if there is no frictional force. So, due to the frictional force, we are standing and we are walking from one place to other. While we are walking, the friction is there between the surface of our feet and surface of the ground. So, the friction makes us to walk. And the friction prevents us from slipping. If there is a more frictional force, we cannot fall fastly. But if there is a less frictional force, we fast soon. And we see furniture at our home, like chair, sofa, tables. They will be at a rest position. They does not move from its position. Where we keep them, it will be there only. It doesn't move because there is a static friction. And even when we apply the force, at that situation, they move. But until we touch, they will be at the rest position due to static friction. So, here the friction makes the position of the objects to be at a particular place. Due to friction, that does not move from its position. If there is no friction, we see chairs, sofas, those are all moving from its places. So the friction makes the position of the objects at the rest position. If we want to hang something to the wall, then we fix the nail. So if there is no friction, even we cannot fix the nail into the wall. And without holding a glass, can we drink milk? We cannot drink, and it becomes difficult for us to drink the milk. So the friction helps us to grip the glass, and it helps us to drink the milk. And not only that, while we are writing with the pen on the paper, so the friction makes us to write with the pen on the paper. Even we are holding the pen, it is because of friction. If there is no friction, the pen may slip down from my hands. So the friction makes writing possible, and it makes easier to write with a chalk piece on the board even. And once I am riding a bicycle and I am going on bicycle, but suddenly I saw small chicks are moving on the road. Then I applied brakes. Then my bicycle became slow and stopped because of friction between the tires of my bicycle and the road. That's why the bicycle stopped. If there is no friction, I may going on. And we see fire produces when we scratch the matchbox. Because of friction, the friction increases the temperature while we are scratching the matchbox. And the friction also will be present when the surface of the matchbox and the surface of the matchsticks makes to produce the friction. So it gets fire. We know that early man used it to sharp stones, and they rubbed gently. So they rubbed rapidly, then they got the fire. So it is because of friction. For example, if we take a blunt knife, it is not working, and it is not chopping any vegetables or any apple or any fruits. So if we rub or gently on a rough irregularities or on the rough surface, then it becomes sharp due to friction. If there is no friction, so the blunted knife will be like a blunt. So when we rub on the irregular surface, then it becomes sharp and then it works. In this way, the friction also helps us, and friction also makes possible to sharpen the objects. And gymnastics use some coarse substances to their hands. So to increase the friction, they use some coarse substances to their hands. So there will be more grip, so they can do. And we see carpenters are making design on the wood. Without holding his belongings like things like hammer or anything, without holding them, can he make design on the wood? It becomes difficult for him to make design on the wood. By holding that, he makes the design. In this way, the friction is very important. Not only that, in our daily life, we hold number of objects like holding the pen, holding the book, holding the bulb, and we hold number of objects. It is possible because of friction. If there is no friction, we cannot hold those objects. Even I am holding this, it is because of friction. And I am holding the box, I am holding the ball, holding the box. These are all possible because of only friction between surface of my palm and surface of this box. And in our daily life, we hold number of books in our hands. It is because of friction. And we play the cricket, and we sit and we stand and ride the bicycle and lift the weights and pull and push, and we do all every works in our daily life. These all activities are possible because of the friction. And we see number of vehicles like car, bikes, scooters, they all are moving on the road. And sometimes some cars slip down because of less friction. When the cars and some vehicles are moving on the road, if there is a smooth surface, they may slip down. And sometimes the car driver applies the brakes and then the car stops. And it is because of friction present between the tires of the car and road surface. So it makes possible to stop the car even. In this way, the friction helps to the car driver to slow or to get car slow or to stop the car. Not only car, any vehicles. If there is no friction, even if we push any vehicle, it continuously moves on. Because there is no friction, there is no stopper. In this way, the friction opposes the movement, so it stops. If there is no friction, the vehicles and objects which are there, they continuously move from its position. Because they does not move, there is no friction. So, in this way, while the vehicles are moving continuously, there will be no transportation for us. And even we cannot move from one place to other. In this way, the vehicles which are there, they disappear from the earth even if there is no friction. It is the importance of the friction. And we see number of constructions are done and buildings are built. These are all constructions are possible because of only the friction. If there is no friction, we cannot construct buildings, dams. So these are all constructions are become impossible if there is no friction. Although friction is very important in our daily life, but it also acts like evil. Unconsiderable in the machineries, wastage of the energy, use of grease to reduce the friction. The main disadvantage is that when the machineries are working, they may get damaged. Not only that, the main disadvantage is that when the friction is there, not only that, for example, if we rub our both hands, means both palm, gently and rapidly, then our palms get heated and they become warm due to frictional force. This situation also occurs in the machineries. So, while they are moving together, they are rubbed rapidly each other so that they may damage and they may spoil easily. In this way, the friction acts like evil. And we know that fans and the bicycle has ball bearings. If we take out the ball bearings, that does not work because of greater friction present in the fan. So here the ball bearings makes the reduce and the ball bearing reduces the friction in the fan and the bicycle. So here the ball bearings reduces, then the fan and the bicycle moves easily. So the disadvantage of the friction makes the objects harder to move. If we push also, it does not move from its position and makes objects move slower. Due to this, the objects which are there, they move slower. Here, while we are running, if we experience it by the fluid frictional force, we cannot run fastly and we cannot reach our destination in time if we experience by the fluid friction force. In these situations, the friction acts as evil. Not only that, when we slip down, a part of our body is in contact with the ground. So, sometimes we may get scratches to our skin. It may lead to get the blood and it may become wound. Once I played a game, that is carom. I played with my brother. Once we played without putting the fine powder to the board. Then the striker and the coins are not moving, it became difficult for us to play. Then my sister suggested for us to pour a fine powder on the carom board. Then we poured fine powder. Then the striker and the coins are moving easily, because before putting the fine powder, the friction is greater, so that the striker and the coins does not move. And after putting the fine powder, due to the powder, the friction reduced, so that the coins and striker moved easily and we played the game. In some situations, it acts like evil and it is disadvantage for us. So when, for example, the engines of the cars get heated because of friction only. So if they get heated, then it may be overheated. Then the car engine may damage, and sometimes it may consume more fuel. Due to this, it causes the loss for fuel as well as the money. And the friction makes the objects to damage easily, because it produces the heat when the objects are moving together. And not only that, we see aeroplanes has a special structure that has special, and they move in the air. Why the aeroplanes has special shape? Why they don't have any triangle or rectangle shape? Why they have only shape like the bird? Why scientists did the aeroplane like that? In the air, there will be more fluid frictional force. So, to overcome the fluid friction force, the aeroplanes has made the shape of the aeroplane in that situation. So, in that shape, it has a special shape. So, we know that aeroplanes, jets and birds will go fast if the fluid friction force is experienced. So, if there is the fluid friction force is less, then they go fast. But if they are experienced by the more fluid friction force, they cannot move in the air fast. So, that's why the aeroplanes and jets has a special shape to overcome the fluid friction force. And sometimes if they are moving in the air, if they are experienced by the more fluid friction force, so they have to exert more energy. Due to friction, we have to exert more energy in the machineries to overcome the fluid frictional force. In this situation, it acts like the evil. And not only that, when we are moving, if there is much rough surface, we cannot move easily due to frictional force. So we have to increase the friction where it is necessary, and we have to decrease the friction where it acts like evil. Increase of the friction and decrease of the friction. We have to increase the friction while where there is the slopy surface, and we have to increase the friction where the machinery's parts does not work. For example, if you are moving on a slippery surface, it is better to wear spiked shoe, and it is advisable to gymnastics to hold and to apply some grease to their hands, and it is advisable to decrease the friction in the machinery parts by applying grease oil to them. So they may become the friction will be less, so the machinery works easily. In this way, when the friction acts like evil, we have to reduce by applying lubricants, example oil, grease, etc. So if any tailor machine is not working, if you pour some oil to them, then they work. So as we know, the friction is advantageous, so we make the friction as the friend. So due to its disadvantages, the friction is evil for us. So we consider it as evil for us. So we know a coin has two surfaces, means it has two sides. Likewise, the friction also has two surfaces, means it has two sides. One is it is very advantageous, and on other hand it acts like evil, it is disadvantage for us. When it is acting like evil for us, so we have to apply some greases. So in this way the friction is evil and necessary in our life. And thanks for listening to my explanation, and special thanks to my beloved secretary and to my principal ma'am and teachers and parents who helped me and who made me in all my ways. Thank you. Thank you a lot.